Welcome to the Living Room Vibe podcast. I'm your host, Danny Lourdes, creating a space where real people have raw conversations. Make yourself at home and let's get into it.
Y'all, I had this moment the other day that got me thinking. You know how your phone keeps telling you the storage is full, and so you start going through your apps trying to figure out what you can delete? Well, I was cleaning out my apps and I came across Marco Polo. Y'all still remember that app? Do people still use that app? I don't even know. But anyway, I came across Marco Polo and I was like, let me just open it and take a look. And I stumbled across these old video messages from when I was going through one of the toughest times in my life. And it hit me that some friends are like those free trial subscriptions. You know, they expire right when you need them most, but others, they're that premium lifetime membership that you never regret investing in. Speaking of investments, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. Today it's just me. You're just going to be vibing with your girl, Danny. But what we're going to talk about today is those friendship subscriptions. The ones that are worth keeping, the ones that need upgrading, and yes, even the ones that might need to be canceled. So I broke it down into sections, keeping in mind the thought process of friendship subscriptions. So the first part is the application process, right? And let's keep it real. Some of us need to start checking for references before we start accepting those new friend applications, okay? But for real, let me break down some of the things that I've learned over the years about spotting the real ones versus the trial members. So when I think about it, I think about, what are some red flags in those new relationships. And what pops to my mind, well, a few things pop to mind. The first thing that I think about is like they only show up for like your highlight reel, birthdays, celebrations, things like that, but they ghost you during your rough patches. Another red flag would be everything's a competition. They can't even celebrate your wins without making it about them. Or what do you call it? It's like they have that vampire energy. Like they always sucking from you, always taking emotional deposits and things like that, mental energy. But they never make any deposits themselves. Yeah, those are the three things that popped into my mind. But I think also what's equally important is also figuring out for yourself what are some green flags, right? And I think about green flags. They respect your boundaries and they communicate their own. And I think that's really important because respecting our boundaries, I think just makes, more of a cohesive relationship, but also the other person communicating their own is just as important so that you guys know where you stand. Another green flag would be they remember the small details. And what I mean by that is like they ask about your kid's doctor's appointment. They ask about, hey, I remember you saying your mom had foot surgery last week. How is she doing? I remember you saying you had a job interview. How did it go? It's just the little things like that. I think another green flag would be that they show up consistently, not just when it's convenient. And I'm gonna stop right there because I think I gave 3 red flags. So 3 green flags. You know me, guys. I like symmetry. Anyway, and so I think those were the important things for me when I think about the application process of everything. It's just recognizing red flags and green flags in those relationships. I think what I want to call this next section. So this next section is the maintenance clause. Now let's talk about those friendship deposits I mentioned earlier. Friendships, period, is like a bank account. You know, you make withdrawals, you make deposits, but you can't keep making withdrawals without making deposits. You know, and I think about how being young when I first got my bank account and stuff like that, and how I was making a lot of small withdrawals, but they added up, and I wasn't making enough deposits to counter those withdrawals. And so I think that's so important to remember, even in friendship, is, you know, you got to make consistent deposits. And what consistent deposits could look like is regular check-ins. Even if it's just like a quick note, you know, a voice note, a text message, being present during both celebrations and struggles, following through on your word. That's a big one for me. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you say you're going to call me, call me. If you say you're going to text me, text me. You know, I have a friend that would talk to me about friendships, and she would always refer to them as a garden. And she would give me this, you know, like garden analogy. And she would always say, like, you know, there's seasonal friends and perennial friends. And I was like, okay, seasonal friends, you know, those are like annual flowers. They're beautiful for a season. You know, seasonal friends could be like your workout buddy, your kid's soccer team parent. You know, they serve a purpose for a season, and that's okay. Perennial friends, they come back year after year. You know, like my college crew that I have, and they might not bloom all year, but their roots are deep. You know, like I have some of my college friends that we're still close, but our communication isn't on a daily basis. But when we do catch up, it's like where we last left off, and as if no time had run between us. And then you have those hardy plants. These, I think these, she would say, would be like your ride or die friends. Those plants that survive drought, frost, and still keep thriving. And I think those type of relationships are rare and definitely worth nurturing, because I feel like, I don't know, I think today's time of building relationships and stuff is very different from, you know, when I was in high school at the top of the century. I'll leave it at that. And, you know, I don't know, it's just this generation is a different breed, and the way they go about things is completely different from when I was in high school. And so I think it's just interesting how the times change how we interact with each other. Like when my mom was in high school is different from the way that I was in high school. It's different from the way that my daughter's in high school. Yeah, just taking that into account, and how the important things that I think have changed over time, you know, for each generation. So I want to tell you a story about a time that I really understood the difference between a subscription and a lifetime membership friendship. Um, Going back to the story I was telling you guys earlier about my Marco Polos that I was looking at, um, I had just had surgery and I was in bad shape. After my surgery, I was bedridden, and my husband, was trying to juggle everything, caring for me, our daughter, my son, who has special needs, and we have no family in Atlanta. And y'all know caring for a special needs child is demanding all on its own, no matter how many parents you got, but definitely doing it alone is a lot. And so anyway, I was in bad shape, and one day, I had my core group of women checking on me and everything and sending me Marco Polos. And so I decided to put all of them together in one Marco Polo so that I can just respond to everybody at once. And I sent this really raw, vulnerable video on Marco Polo to my friends, and I wasn't even trying to be strong anymore at that point. I was a mess. And I just straight up asked for prayers because this recovery was kicking my behind. And what happened next was one of my friends contacted my husband. In my core group, all my girls have my husband's number. But one of them contacted my husband and got everyone else's number who was in the Marco Polo. And suddenly my lifetime membership friends activated their benefits, so to speak. These friends weren't even friends with each other. They knew of each other, but they came together for me like Avengers, is how I feel. We had groceries showing up, meals being prepped, um, my house getting clean, my kids being watched so that Smith could just focus on me. Um, that was when I understood real friendship isn't about perfect attendance, but about perfect timing. At the time, I think only one of the core lived in Atlanta. And so, I mean, I had people coming from out of town to like clean my house and cook for me, and it just blew me away. And I was just so grateful for that. And it's definitely a time that I'll never forget. Which brings me to my next part of the subscription is the renewal process. I think that with friendships, life happens, right? And friendships have to evolve. Just like in any relationship, like our relationships with our significant others, or even with our kids, like with our parents, like we're supposed to be evolving all the time, and we're never the same people we were yesterday, much less 5 years ago, much less, 2 weeks ago. So we're always evolving, and I think friendships have to evolve in the same way. And what that can look like is single friends learning to share you with your spouse, adjusting to parent life or different parenting styles if you and your friend both have kids, career changes affecting availability and your common interests. I think that's something that was really big for me with the career changes. I'm an entrepreneur, so we wear multiple hats in our line of work. And I think even with parenting, like, when my son was diagnosed with autism, it took a lot of our time and mental energy, physical energy to really just give to him, give to each other, and give to my daughter. And so I didn't have a lot of time to give to my friendships. Um, Another phase of friendship in regards to evolving is health challenges. Showing up and changing the way you guys maybe hang out, or hey, the amount of time you guys hang out. I think these are all things that in life we all have to kind of just be mindful of, because if we're not, and we're not willing to evolve in our friendships as life happens, then that's when things can become one-sided and frustrations happen and attitudes and all that stuff. And even in those times where you need to reevaluate and evolve the friendship, I think you got to renegotiate the terms. When it's those times where, like, hey, all of a sudden I've had a kid and I can't stay up late anymore because I need my sleep, things like that. Or because sometimes you just got to be real and just say, hey, I can't do our weekly brunches anymore, but can we make it monthly? Or I might not answer calls after 8 p.m. because that's when I got to put my kids to bed. Or I need to reschedule our regular coffee date to virtual catch-ups because I'm in this busy season of my life. Or because I have this health issue now. I got to do it virtual. There's many reasons that you can give, and they all be valid for you. And I think that, if it's a lifetime membership subscription of a friendship, then I think they'd understand, because just as much as life is happening to you, life is probably happening to them too. But I think sometimes we can be scared to speak up, not wanting the friendship to change, or feel like, if I say something, they'll be upset or whatever. And sometimes that's the case. And if that is the case, then you got to maybe start thinking about the last, I guess, section of the subscription, which is the termination clause, like when to cancel your subscription. And I think for me, some things that pop to mind when I think about when is it time to cancel a subscription to a friendship, I think when the friendship becomes one-sided, like I mentioned earlier, like you're always the one initiating and giving. You're always the one making those deposits, and they're the ones always making the withdrawal. I think when they consistently disrespect your boundaries or your values, it's time to terminate the relationship. And I think, like, when they're stuck in like a toxic pattern and refuse to grow, I'm not saying like don't be patient or help them through their time of struggle, but I think it's the refusing to grow part that makes it toxic. And I'm not telling you to go ahead and cut all these people off if they fall into this boat, but I think it's definitely something to think about and reevaluate, your friendships if they fall into that category. But I also think too, when thinking of the termination clause, is being aware of when you're growing apart versus growing up. And what I mean by that is Like growing apart is when your paths just kind of naturally, diverge into different interests, different lifestyles, things like that. But growing up, I think that's when you both evolve, but choose to evolve together. Growing apart is like losing touch. Growing up is touching base differently. So I think just realizing the difference between the two, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes people grow apart, and sometimes it can come out of left field. You're like, man, I don't talk to her as much anymore. I don't talk to him as much anymore. Not that you've had a falling out, not that, something went wrong. It's just that, that time that season has come and ended. When I think about the termination clause of it all, I feel like it doesn't have to be done with hostility, or with bad blood, so to speak. I think friendships can terminate with grace and care. And I think ways that can happen is, one, by having just honest conversation about where you stand. Two would be to acknowledge the good times and the lessons learned throughout your friendship. And I think the third thing could be setting clear but kind boundaries. Like, don't be ghosting, don't be having no drama, don't be burning bridges, things like that. But really just, we grown, be grown. We ain't in high school no more, middle school. So I think just, having those no drama, no ghosting, like, we're adults, have conversations. We can do that. But before we wrap up today's episode, I want you to think about your own friendship subscriptions. Like, which ones need upgrading? Which ones are serving their purpose? And which ones might need to be canceled? Really think about what you want your terms and conditions to be for your subscription, for your friendships in your life. And with that, don't forget to tune in next week, Wednesday. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out.
That's all for today's episode of the Living Room Vibe podcast, where real people have raw conversations. I'm your host, Danny Lourdes. Thanks for vibing with me. If you're feeling the vibe, follow us on Instagram at the LRV podcast, as well as hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. It helps more people find their way to our living room. And as always, thanks for listening. Bye.